Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of a stream. And that's what does it. Hope everyone is doing well. Microphone's a bit too far away. You just need to clickety-clack. 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 That's interesting. Twitch is now starting default unmuted. All right. Sharing links. Excuse me. Oogie doogie. I think that's that. Now I can work on getting our combined chat working. Good morning, Lord Volpex. Hope you're doing well. Yamashisha, same to you. Hope all is well, or as well as can be. All right. The combined chat on my side is still not working. I love how it works inside OBS, but it doesn't work on my screen. Good morning, Kandaria. Hope you're doing well. Fair enough, Lord, fair enough. One foot in front of the other. One step at a time. All those inspirational quotes insert here. Good morning, Alphadu. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Anon. Yeah, and sometimes happens that the stream software doesn't hook into the browser panel. Just takes a couple times opening and closing the screen so it can connect. There we go. And it's connected. Now I've got a combined chat on my screen. Well, as long as you're working hard, there's no problems there. It's not important how hard you work, it's important how hard people think you work. I'm doing as well as can be. Busy brewing a bit of a migraine, but, you know, that's life. So today, the plan would be 2 Billy Bobs, 3 Rito Foss, 2 T Foss. Yamashisha, you're gonna have to say that again. I'm not sure I'm understanding. Yeah, I mean, that's a good workplace then. When I worked in corporate, the best trick I ever pulled was convincing my boss that if you see me fucking around, it's a good thing. It means nothing wrong. Yeah, I remember that. I think I made a short out of it as well. No clue. I think that would have been one of the surgeries. So February, somewhat time between February 2 years ago and February last year, probably. I say that because I've never actually taken a break. I'm sick. Holidays are. Uh, 19th of September 2023. Hard to believe that. It's almost 2 years ago. That would have been after... What would that have been after? Remember. Sinus surgery? I think that was after the sinus surgery. Definitely wasn't after the second voice surgery. Yeah, it would have been the sinus surgery. It was a rough year, that one, with 4 surgery. Would not recommend. Being synced is 20th. Then would 6. Synced 6. 26. Yes. 26 and 27 be linked. Good morning, Shadow. Hope you're doing well. Billy Bob, Billy Bob. One shot, one shot, one shot. Turned into series. Doki. And humans a space cat. Oh, 7 videos. That's the plan. That sucks. Good morning, Doug and James. But yeah, that definitely sucks. Fair enough, Shadow. Fair enough. That's the gamer sub stuff, isn't it? Well, I mean, cancer strikes at all weird times. I had a cousin who got quite a bad case of cancer in his 20s. I mean, it's not even considering the child cancers. What is V? Right. Booster pack. You buy a booster box. You can buy a booster. It's actually quite cheap for a booster box. That's very cheap. I'm a Magic player, so cheap is good. Oh, they got sleeves. Oh, it's a binder. And a deck box. That's all pretty cool. Interesting, interesting. I don't know whether I'd actually buy any of it. Night crew life for the win, yes. If I don't take my sleeping pills, I'm always night crew. It's currently 9:19 in the morning for me. Must not buy more TCG stuff. Must not buy more TCG. I couldn't tell you whether it's sunny or raining outside. My life is spent in a box. With no windows. Why I take extra vitamin D pills. Oh, multivitamin. Although this whole sun coming up at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then going down at 9 o'clock at night is very weird to me. Very unnatural. Feels so wrong. Ooh. Ooh. Fair enough, Yamashisha. I'm in the basement. Well, basement. And in a locked room. Closed room. Could be a hurricane happening outside and I wouldn't know. Which is, you know, speaks well to the room. Or noise. "3 a.m. is saying, we can do horror stories. I summoned the devil at 3 a.m. He told me to go to bed. Boo, devil, boo." There you go. Right. Ooh, big yawn. Big yawn. Ugh. I think we shall move on to the first Billy Bob chapter for the day. Billy Bob 26. Yeah, that's very true. I've been told on numerous occasions that my style isn't really good for horror. I'm too animated, too full of energy. I do not speak like I have. Fair enough. I mean, I don't mind this. With South Africa, you kind of get used to it. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read Teapot, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern use. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read Teapot, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker and is part of a series. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Grand Superintendent Meldon. Grand Superintendent Meldon. Mailman. Grand Superintendent Malmander stood on the bridge of the Gresland Dreadnought Council's Pride. Water was too heavy and too unwieldy for them to fill a ship with it, despite being an aquatic species. But they had massive pools spread throughout the ship for downtime and getting out of their excess. For this reason, they had always built strong ships, and since they were the Council's main police force, it made sense that they'd have the bulk of the main fleet. The Crusticans were bogged down on their home system, since it shared the Crusticans were bogged down on their home system, since they shared it with the Libertonians, and their ongoing invasion of Bastion, so the invasion into human space fell to his kind. The humans had just sent a large fleet into Libertonian territory, and from what they could tell, that meant most of their fleet was on the offensive, or rather a forward defensive of someone else's territory. They'd soon learn the error of sparking a war with the Council. The fleet was on edge of humans. The FTL lanes ran through a brutal system they called Gemini, some sort of two-handed creature from their north. The system itself had two stars spinning around one another, and he had no idea how they colonized a planet tossed between such extreme seasons. But they had no plans for landing. They'd brush aside orbital defense. They'd brush aside orbital defenses, bomb the planet for a while, and move on to actual human colonies with land the Council could use. They were just one system out of Gemini, in a dead system called TR-231. There were some dead planets, an asteroid belt, but the material resources were minimal enough to make mining operations not cost-effective. The fleet was approaching the asteroid belt, when suddenly the FTL field flickered and stopped. The ships groaned a bit, slowing down as the lanes vanished around them. Mailender looked around at his crew. Report! We're seeing total FTL gate failure across the sector, sir. Impossible. There weren't any humans behind us. They couldn't have destroyed the gates. Readings indicate the gates are intact. They just, stopped? That's not possible. Only the Council can control the gates. Fleet status. All ships reporting in. No damage, sir. Should we take the defensive position? Any civilian traffic? No. Just the declaration of war. Since the declaration of war, the space lanes into human space have been empty. We're in a dead system. The humans aren't supposed to have much of a fleet left. They're just trying to slow us down. Send out maintenance crews to the nearest gates. Get them operational again. What about an ambush, sir? What did I just say? They don't have more ships. Just get them out there. I don't even know how long it would take to reach human space without those gates. The average ship could travel at 10,000 miles fast, but nowhere near FTL far. There are some minor readings in the asteroids, sir. Minor? How minor? Maybe some small shelters, sir. No engines detected. Ignore them. But just some old survey stations before they realized the system wasn't interesting like most. Interesting, most likely. What they didn't know was that they were being watched. What they didn't know was they were being watched from those asteroids. Rear Admiral Wayne was leaning over the shoulder of one of his tech to read the console. They were running dark at the moment. East defense station hidden amongst the rocks. They're just sitting there. Yes, sir. Looks like they're sending out maintenance team to one of the gates. About a lot of good that'll do them. No defensive screen. Nothing. Just travel formation. Yes, sir. We have a clean shot on the 4 dreadnoughts. The flagship is currently screened by another dreadnought. All right. We'll blow that one up and then get to the flagship. And then get the flagship. That's our primary objective. Yes, sir. The Lucifer's Hammer was the latest American military station, built in secret and towed to an asteroid. It housed no less than 8 nuclear reactors, all of which went to powering the main gun. They hadn't figured out how to make the Death Star yet, but this wasn't bad. They could fire a chunk of special alloy 20 feet in diameter at 10,000 miles a second. That was about 5% of the speed of light, which was more impressive than it sounded. Especially when you see that Especially when you see that it's 10,000 miles every single second. It was the largest, most powerful gun America had ever made, and they were already trying to make something bigger and more powerful. Since the greater galaxy had the ability to move ships around through FTL gates for centuries, and they fought around important junctions while seeking to protect infrastructure and colonies, they had no desire to develop any such weapon. If they missed a shot, the possible collateral damage was beyond compare. But humans, and especially Americans, fought on their own rules. With their ability to sabotage the gates, and their ability to live out in empty stretches of space, they had the perfect opportunity. Back on the flagship, Grand Principal Mulder was grumbling and cursing as he paced back and forth on the bridge. The ships had reported in and were holding position. The dreadnought Thyron's Fury, just ahead of them, was holding position. The principal in charge was a veteran, and the ship itself was top of the line, though not as good as the flagship. It had armor 3 feet thick at its strongest, a crew complement of 15,000 including soldiers, some of the strongest guns in the galaxy, and had been tested in battle 23 times. Sir, I'm detecting a sudden energy buildup in the asteroids. Is it an engine? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not detecting an engine signature, but I'm seeing an energy spike and power with our entire fleet and 2 other dreadnoughts. Something in the field blinked, and suddenly the Thyron's Fury was splitting apart. What happened? The Grand Principal exclaimed. What just happened? The reactor is going critical, sir. They watched in horror as the dreadnought began to rupture and split, chunks of it exploding as the ship died. The oxygen was vented out immediately, and since they hadn't been at battle stations, none of the bulkheads had been in place before they were hit. The pieces of metal began to drift away from the center, where the reactor had exploded. Smaller systems rupturing as energy cells went critical, bodies floating in space. The water from their relaxation pools freezing and splintering in the vacuum. Sir, hard evasive maneuvers. Start firing into the asteroid field. We don't have a lock on any coordinates, sir. Just open fire at any rock. All of them, just start shooting back. All of them, start shooting back. The ship started to spin their engines back up, moving in a hurry now. Look at that. Isn't that cute? Look at that. Isn't that cute? They're trying to take evasive maneuvers, Rear Admiral Wayne said, as he watched the enemy fleet finally start to move. They'd had to wait to the gun to charge back up before they could fire again. But there wasn't a chance in hell that the dreadnought could avoid a bullet traveling at over 10,000 miles a second. The fire from the fleet began to slam into the asteroids. It was mostly energy bolts and the few missiles, plus much larger versions of what they called matter slammers. The rocks before them started to shudder and split under the fire, but they weren't focused. They were just cracking open. The rocks before them started to shudder and split under the fire, but they weren't focused. They were just cracking open the first layer of the rocks they could aim at. The humans were beyond that, waiting for the right moment. A few squadrons of fighter bombers were holding back until they had a signal to attack. Coffee. Oh, welcome, Bot. Thank you for your contribution to... Absolutely nothing. But I got a present for you, Bot. Hello, Bot. There you go. There's your present. Attack. Wayne knew they were severely outnumbered, even if the platform could wipe out their dreadnoughts in a single shot. Once the Xenos figured out their location, it was only a matter of time before they'd be destroyed. But the point wasn't to survive. It was to kick them in the nuts as hard as possible. He didn't really have time to give everyone a big speech, especially since the battle had already started. So instead, he gave everyone the green. Railguns began to spit a superheated metal at the Xenos. The fighter bombers started to pour out of the rocks and swarm over the closest capital ships. Special Space Marine boarding craft landed from the rocks. Special Space Marine boarding craft launched from the rocks, slamming into the smaller Xeno ship. The battle had truly begun as the Xenos tried to get into a better formation, while the humans shot at them from defensive platforms and rocks. The Lucifer's hammer might be destroyed soon, but they hadn't found their position yet, so they took aim at the capacitors. So they took aim as the capacitors were finally ready. Wayne opened the channel to all humans in the area. Well, I'm about to blow up their nicest ship, boys. When we all get to Tahal, you have direct orders to take over. You have direct orders to start taking over. We've already stolen the Devil's Hammer. We might as well start taking his land, too. He grinned as he looked out at the Xenos' fleet. Their flagship was dead to rights. The Council's largest, most powerful ship. They bragged it could take a broadside from any dreadnought ever made and shrug it off. Well, that might be true, but the humans hadn't made a dreadnought. And while you sorry shits are taking the hell to start... And while you sorry shits are taking over hell, start making a statue dedicated to the fine American who started war with the rest of the galaxy. He pushed a button to fire as he said, "This one's for you, Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Billy Bob, Space Trucker. "365 degrees, burning down the house." Billy Bob was drumming as hard as he could on the invisible drums in front of him as Emily shook her head. Why is he burning down the house again? Is it diseased or something? And couldn't they just clean it? Emily, you should know this by now. Emily, you should know this by now. Most human music is not literal. It's full of metaphors and analogies and, bullshit. We're generally just singing about fucking or getting fecked up. And then some sports songs and war songs for good measures. Although one could argue that the war songs fall under getting fecked up. What about those blues songs? Well, generally they're about fecking, or being sad they haven't fecked in a while, or not fecking a specific person. Occasionally, they're sad about other things. I was just using some generalizations. But there are a lot of songs about metaphors focused on the themes I mentioned. There are those, of course. There are those literal songs, but they aren't very common. Although there's a good song about changing the name of a city. Billy Bob had laid claim to the Rosie and gotten the archangels off of it. Once Billy Bob had laid claim to the Rosie again and gotten the Archangels off of it, the USS Predator had gone into attack mode. They attacked and destroyed a Crustacan ship, making a show of bombarding a tracking station on the planet, and then skipped off as the Council species tried to figure out what had happened. Getting Archangels onto planets wasn't hard. Getting them off was the trouble. So instead of taking the fight to the surface, they began to raid shipyards and orbital platforms. They all knew this wasn't going to be a quick war, so delaying production of new ships for a few months was more than worth it. Since the Archangels weren't doing their best to ruin the Xeno infrastructure. Since the Archangels were doing their best to ruin the Xeno infrastructure, the news had forgotten about Billy Bob and Emily. He had no doubt that the crabs were still looking for them, but they probably thought that they were on a carrier that had been running amok. So Billy Bob had the Rosie docked at Black Market Goblin Station, and they'd rented her out a room for the Galactic Week while they waited for the CIA to show up. He'd make sure to crank up the gravity in the Rosie twice a day and play around with Stomper so his muscles didn't atrophy or anything like that. Plus, he had fun playing around with the Space Fox horse. It hadn't grown too much since they got it, but he was still excited for the day that he could go into... But he was still excited for the day that he could ride it into battle, although against what he had no idea. So they'd spent 3 days so far, hanging out in the room listening to music, or going to one of the station's restaurants, or just wandering around for the hell of it. He'd quickly become popular as a chef, teaching them how to properly cook human food for maximum enjoyment. Their supplies were limited now that the war had cut off the supply, or at least made it harder to get. Yet human food went a long way for most Xenos. Humans were incredibly dense after all. What would be a tiny portion to a human was a feast for a Xeno. A few omnivores and carnivores that were civilized paid very well to get the incredible treats humans enjoyed. Billy Bob had been learning more about the Xenos in the last few days. Without constantly driving around and knowing he needed to recover from getting the crap kicked out of him, he had nothing much else to do. For example, he had learned the space goblins had been scavengers on their home planet, and had just started to explore the greater galaxy when the regulation war was in full force. As such, they were the only non-Council species allowed to trade in uninhabited sectors that were within Council space. It had been a quick fix to allow them to start trading while the fate of the galactic government was to allow them to start trading while the fate of the galactic government was being decided. The Council founders had figured they'd join up once the war was over. But instead, the goblins just figured if the founders settled political disputes that way, they'd just remain neutral. And too many member species had started setting up trade with them for it to make sense to shut them down. So for the last few hundred years, they'd been living in a grey area of the law, founding stations outside of directly regulated and monitored sectors of the Council in order to trade freely. The Council wasn't thrilled, but it served a purpose in letting carnivores and omnivores get meat while keeping the hands of the Council clean. Aside from the Crustacans, of course, but the law was different when you were the secret police. Also, he found out that there were a ton of different ways species slept when they checked out the room and had to figure out what kind of bed to order. The space goblins, for example, slept in these padded chambers in groups. The Borks would sleep in more or less sitting up so their horns didn't gouge anything, but arranged in a circle so that they could keep their eyes on everyone else. The space ants and the goblins. The space ants the goblins used as guards had to sleep in complete darkness, with something covering them and joining by no less than 2 and no greater than 4 other space ants. Apparently, humans had incredibly simple sleeping needs compared to most of the galaxy. The same with Libertonians. He did discover that their beds weren't flat like humans, but they had a sort of padded bowl, so when you slept in their padded bowl, but when they slept in it, their wings would fit better and extend around their shoulders like a cloak. He'd been trying to keep a mental list of eagle things and raptor things with dealing with her. The appearance he just considered a tie. The pointed beak was more like a dinosaur. Same with the talons and claws and stuff, but wings and, mostly feathers. Bird. The sleeping thing was totally a nest, so bird. but she shredded and ate meat like a, well, eagles also ate meat, so it was confusing. She finally took off the survival suit on the second day to get it mended and cleaned, which was when he discovered that her downy coloring was besides her white hair. Feathers. Head feathers, shit. But Bob was struggling to figure out the terms in his head still. Either way, her head was white, and that ran down to the and that ran down to around her shoulders before it turned black. And then she had blood red just along her forearms. She changed into what he could only describe as a loose grey vest with 70s bell bottoms and a broken neck. With 70s bell bottoms with Birkenstocks. She explained that their claws cut up many surfaces. She explained that their claws cut up many surfaces, that they wore special shoes to prevent that. At least, she didn't wear socks. He never would have forgiven her. Although, the older he got, the more comfy socks and Birkenstocks sounded. With the bell bottoms, he didn't see what the coloring of her legs was like. He'd been avoiding any discussion about her anatomy, like the plague. However, he'd been avoiding any discussions about her anatomy, like the plague, since he had no idea how to approach it. Her chest was sort of arranged like he'd figured fit for a female, but she had a tuft of feathers around her. But she had a tuft of feathers around where he expected cleavage to start, though what was beneath the vest was still a mystery. Was she even a mammal? She wasn't cold-blooded. Without a cloak on. Without the cloak of the suit to hide under, Without the cloak of the suit to hide under, he also discovered that she had a small tail. Then? Was it called a tail on a bird? Raptor? Feck. He was confused. When she caught him looking, she'd mentioned it was for stabilization, and he'd quickly changed the subject. He knew that she liked him. Aside from the trying to cut his throat that one time, she did like the Good morning, Vaka. I'm doing well, and yourself? Aside from trying to cut. Did you hear a South African won the world's strongest man? There you go. News of the day. Brought to you by someone. He knew that she liked him. Aside from trying to cut his throat that one time, she did like to rest. She did like to rest against him while they listened to music. And he caught her staring at him when she was awake. And he caught her staring at him when she was awake during his own sleep cycle. He didn't like her bright purplish skin. He did like her bright purplish pink eyes, though. That was cool. Sometimes she'd lean against him while they waited for... She'd even go so far as to rub her cheek to... She'd even go so far as to rub her cheek to his in public. But she mentioned it was strange for her to have bent down to do so. But she mentioned it was strange for her to have to bend down to do so, which made him even more aware of the strange sensation that she was taller than him. Thank you very much for the $2 Australian Waka. Very much appreciated. It's all good. It's all good. Than him. He was taller than him. Betty Bob just didn't know what to do. He wasn't a diplomat. He'd never really considered paying attention to Xenas in this sort of way until everyone told him that he damn well better. Whenever he did hear something about her species and affection, it always sounded like a surefire way to get torn to shreds for a human. He was much stronger than her, but his skin wasn't exactly protected from being torn to shreds by super sharp Space Eagle raptor talons. Did he dare even approach the topic? He'd been all but told that his country demanded it of him for the war effort. That was a whole mess of pressure that he'd never, ever expected to have applied to him. Maybe he should look up more about the Libertonians. Or what if she looked at his extranet history? But what if she looked at his extranet history and saw him looking up Libertonians doing it? If it weren't for all the alcohol he'd been drinking, he was confident that he'd be super stressed out. He was trying to explain to her some of the enigma that was talking heads when they both were startled by the sound of the room's comp screen beeping at them. He quickly turned the music off and turned it on. Yes? He was looking at a rather attractive woman with blonde hair and emerald eyes in some sort of strange sparkling green dress. He was looking at a rather attractive woman with blonde hair and emerald eyes in some sort of sparkling green dress that matched her eyes. She smiled at him, flashing her white teeth. Colonel Billy Bob? Never expected to hear that, but yes. Who are you? Who else is looking for you? Who else is looking for you this far into council space on the black market station while you shack up with your space bird, Eagle Raptor? The woman looked confused for a second as she... The woman looked confused for it as he shook his head. Never mind. You're with the CIA, of course. Well, what do we do from here? Some sort of secret meeting? We're in what can be considered friendly territory. Just meet me in the bar downstairs. I'd like to get a drink with you and talk things over. She smiled again as the feed went dead. He turned and then jerked. He turned and then jerked in surprise as he found Emily standing literally right behind him. Ah! Who was that? You heard the call. That's the girl from the human intelligence outfit. How is she dressed like that? It's a dress. Human women wear them to look attractive. Had he missed something? The trucker was confused. He shivered. She turned as she moved towards the exit. She'd gotten her survival suit and cloak back, but hadn't put them on yet. She was still in that oddly retro outfit. Let's go speak with her so that I can set the record straight. What? Betty Bob was lost. If there was such a thing as a translator to translate female to him, then he'd be gladly pay at least one of his 10 billion credits that he was going to get for it. He followed after her, grabbing a jacket on his way out so that he didn't look quite so redneckish in this usual plaid shirt. But as he went to grab his jacket, he saw Emily's gloves had been... But as he went to grab his jacket, he saw Emily's gloves had been dropped to the floor. That meant that she was going out with her talons bared. He didn't understand. He didn't understand why, so he quickly pulled the jacket on and moved to catch up with her. She was walking very briskly as she was already down the stairs in the hotel's bar where he found her. Then he saw the human woman with that sparkling bright green dress. She saw him and started to walk forward with a smile, one leg visible up to the mid-thigh through the slit in her dress. She extended a hand. Billy Bob? But before he could approach, Emily stepped between them. He was even more confused than earlier when he saw her wings spread out wide, as if she was taking up as much space as possible. Betty Bob couldn't even see the woman past her, but suddenly her white wings shifted as she brought... But suddenly her white wings shifted as he saw bright red feathers bared beneath the normal white ones. What was going on? Hello? He couldn't see what was going on, but the woman was looking up at Emily, towering over her, wings spread, talons extended out, the gossamer dragonfly-like wings in between her upper and lower arms shimmering in the light. Emily didn't respond. Emily didn't respond. She just advanced, slowly, one step at a time as the human backed up. When the CIA agent tried to step to the side, Emily snapped at her. Emily snapped at her and quickly stepped to block her. What's she doing? She said, as the now whole bar was watching. I have no idea, Billy Bob called out from the other side. Emily just let out a menacing raptor-like screech and advanced quickly as the woman squealed and backed up. Emily, what are you doing? He said, while following behind. He said while following behind the Libertonian. Why is she doing this? I have no idea. Stop her. I don't know how. Emily advanced again, and the woman shrieked as she was slapped. As she was slapped with those big wings, until she turned and ran out of the bar. Once she had done that, Emily turned to Billy Bob and saw even more of those bright red feathers bared beneath the white one. She flapped her wings at him, and he backed up a ways. Then she turned, startling the patrons as she dashed forward, stealing a bottle of alcohol from the bar and 2 plates of food from nervous space goblins. She quickly handed them to Billy Bob, basically shoving them in his face until he grabbed them all, rather awkwardly, since he only had 2 hands. Once he had done that, she lowered her wings, standing to Billy Bob's left as he felt one wing on his back and the other in front. He stared back at the confused human woman and called out, Clearly. She stared back at the confused human woman and called out, Clearly I'm the better provider, not to mention my natural bright coloring is much more impressive. Even with your cheap color enhancement, he's obviously chosen his mate. Billy Bob nearly dropped everything in his hands and there. Billy Bob nearly dropped everything in his hands then and there. What? Was all he could gasp out. So ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. End of story. Oh, I don't actually have to put that in potted. Updoot. Fun, Billy Bob. Coffee. Who knew that mustaches tasted like coffee? And Monster. And last night's dinner. End of chapter, not end of story. Okie dokie. I think I cut it out. Because I don't need to say the end of the story or chapter. Because it says, and so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob. Give me 16 seconds and I will have a look-see. Space Trucker. So ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. There we go. I think I said end of story at the end and I just cut it out. I think that's where the confusion comes in. Alrighty. All good, all good. All right. Billy Bob 27. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob Space Trucker, and is part of the series. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 27. The invasion of Bastion was not going well for the crabs. While most of the human ships were engaging in a defense of the Libertonian homeworld, the terrain on Bastion was more than challenging for the crabs who weren't designed for mountain combat. They had the weight of sheer numbers on their sides, however, and many wars are decided by statistics and not people. That wasn't always true, however, and so for the pure tenacity and determination of the humans was proving very difficult for the crabs to overcome. That, and the fact that humans had been waging war for centuries, well, the crabs got lazy. Well, the crabs got lazy with being able to coerce and intimidate the species around them also helped. The crabs had settled into the same tactic they used at the end of their regulation war. After finding out the humans had plenty of soldiers with the ability to fly, and a preference for aircraft used in close support, they'd begun to coat the plains of the planet with the anti-air weapon. By this point, both sides had started to build up emplacements and get their heavier weapons to the front. Instead of the mass infantry battles of the early days of the invasion, the crabs had adjusted their targeting computers as well. Getting a solid lock on the human soldiers was difficult for them, and traditional battles between Crusticans and Libertonians would devolve into hand-to-hand combat. Though the inclusion of humans with their ballistic weapons and sniper rifles wasn't something the crabs planned on. They just tried to fire their weapons all over to provide some sort of covering fire as they rushed the human emplacements. Their armored crawlers supplemented the heavier guns behind their lines. Americans had favored an emphasis on lighting war. Good morning, Anthony. Hope you're doing well. Americans had favored an emphasis on lightning warfare for generations, so the sudden siege warfare, with heavy emplacements being established on either side, took some adjusting. They lacked the howitzers of old, but the crabs were awful at spotting snipers and recon teams. Not to mention the humans holding the high ground made the mass charges of the crabs easier to withstand. Not all Libertonian cities were in the hills and mountains. Finchburg was a very important coastal port, providing access to a massive spaceport and the automated fisheries that would help supply food during the siege. The city was situated at the mouth of a large river, just at the base of some foothills. The crabs were unrelenting in their constant assault, but the humans were holding the city for now. The command center was rocked by another explosion as the crab energy bombs slammed down on their fortifications. A power-suited major was looking at the hollow map in the center of the bunker. The edge of the city was a mass of trenches, foxholes, and bunkers that humans had hastily built up. The 9th Stormtroopers held the center, while the 52nd Marines held the southern portion, and the 67th held the north. Sniper teams from the 5th Recon were on what was left of the buildings at the edge of the city, providing support, mostly by blowing holes in the crab officers with anti-material rifles. As the Major examined the information on the map, there was a beep. As the Major examined the information on the map, there was a red blip on the south. As the Major examined the information on the map, there was a red blip on the south. Tapping it, a frantic comm message broadcast over the speaker. Matriarch! They've got a fecking matriarch! The bombardment was clearly an attempt to bog down reinforcements while they made a concerted push to the south. Feck that, the Major said simply, and walked for the bunker's exit. The forward positions were being overrun again as the Marines tried to hold their ground. Lieutenant Jackson was in an MG nest near the back of the trenches. The gunner in front of him, laying out as much fire as he could without melting the barrel of the gun. The crabs had advanced with armored crawlers, using them to absorb most of the fire until the infantry could rush forward into the trenches. Shotguns and submachine guns were providing very effective shotguns and submachine guns were proving very effective within the trenches themselves, but they also moved forward. But they'd also moved forward a matriarch. They were walking tanks, massive in size with multiple claws, and this one was also holding two nasty-looking blades to make its close combat potential even deadlier. What made it worse was some sort of new shield they hadn't seen before, strong enough to absorb an incoming bullet as it tore through the Marines at the front. Just before the lieutenant could order his forces to start pulling back, he heard a message over the comm. Reinforcements bound. Bound. Reinforcements inbound. There was a shriek in the air of jump jets before a figure in black power armor slammed down on one of the crabs advancing over the trenches, crushing it in a shower of that green gunk that they were covered. Another crab charged the exposed figure, which turned and punched it in the face. The increased strength enough to entirely pulverize the crab's head with one blow. The figure began to walk forward, firing a massive pistol down into the trenches it was walking over. With its free hand, it lobbed a grenade into a forward trench that had been entirely overrun, pulping the crab's side. The matriarch saw her new opponent and reared back on its legs, bellowing out a challenge, which the power suit returned with a single raised finger. The power suit fired the massive hand cannon into the shielded target, noticing the rippling energy that stopped the bullets, and simply holstered it. Pulling free a knife that was more of a damn sword. Pulling free a knife that was more of a damn short sword. The matriarch charged forward, swinging those blades as the power suit dove to the side, rising up to slash at the claw holding one of those blades, cutting it free with a single strike. The matriarch howled in pain, turning to swipe with the remaining blade, only to have the power suit jump over the swipe and cut that claw free as well. And the matriarch howled in pain, turned to swipe with the remaining blade, only to have the power suit jump over and swipe and cut that claw free as well. This had left the power suit dangerously close to the matriarch, however. It lashed out with a pointed leg, jamming it through the power suit's right shoulder, holding it in place as he lashed out with the smaller claws. The power suit turned the knife, cutting yet another claw free, before the matriarch jammed another leg through the power suit's left thigh. The human inside was entirely pinned now, dropping the knife lightly out of pain. The matriarch raised up, intending to make an example of this one as she pulled the human towards its massive teeth for more. But the matriarch made a mistake. The power suit grabbed the top and bottom of the jaw, ignoring the mandibles as it began to pull them over. The power suit grabbed the top and bottom of the jaw, but ignoring the mandibles as it began to pull them open wider. The matriarch shuddered and tried to close its maw around the power suit in a struggle of strength. But humans were dense, heavy, strong, which was made all the more powerful by their power suit. Soon the matriarch was backing up, trying to pull its legs free of the human to toss it away, as its maw was opened wider and wider. Then, with a sickening crack that echoed across the battlefield, the power suit had ripped the matriarch's jaw completely off, letting it drop to the ground as green and purple gunk bled freely from the massive wound. It gurgled and screeched in pain, staggering back as the human took hold of the sharp xeno legs piercing its body, then simply ripped them free of the sockets as the matriarch howled even louder. It sank to the ground as the power suit stood before it, raising a fist as the human leaned in and started punching the giant crab in the thick. Started punching the crab in that giant, thick, armored skull. The cracking of exoskeleton could be heard as the human kept punching and punching, reducing the matriarch's head to a pulp. Reducing the matriarch's head to mush and pulp. The crabs broke after that, turning and fleeing even as the humans spied after them. The figure in that power suit wasn't done, and pulled the hand cannon back out, firing on the crabs as well. Firing on the crabs as well while they scurried away for their lives. The Marines rushed forward to retake the lost trenches. Then, while the corpsmen approached the power suit, the figure pulled the legs out of his shoulder and thigh as the lieutenant watched. "Jesus Christ, we need to get you to a field hospital." Bullshit. The power-suited figure reached into a pocket, pulling out a tube of industrial adhesive, jamming it into the shoulder first, filling it with the material before doing the same on its thigh. I already lost that arm in a few first. I already lost that arm in the first contact war, and my leg will do and my leg will do just fine in that suit. Christ, who are you? The figure opened the faceplate to reveal a woman's The figure opened the faceplate to reveal a woman's weathered face, one eye clearly cybernetic. Shit, I'm Major Mary Sue, badass mother of Billy Bob, space trucker. Badass mother. Major Mary Sue, badass mother of Billy Bob, space trucker. Never want to mess with Mary Sue. What do you mean I've chosen a mate? Billy Bob asked, looking confused as hell while Emily stood next to him, wings extended around her. When she looked at him, he leaned back a bit, seeing some sort of emotion in her eyes he didn't understand. You mean you chose her over me? What? I never said that. I provided you with food and alcohol. My coloring is obviously superior. Emily, I don't know what's going on here. You're acting crazy. Crazy? She screamed at him and then pushed, a change seeming to take hold of her as her wings folded back and her hands lowered. He could see tears in her eyes then. You think I'm crazy? No, wait. But the damage was done as she began to cry, turning and running back up the stairs. Billy Bob cursed and quickly put the bottle of booze and the plates of food back on the bar as he went running up after her. The door to the room was open, but inside he found a bathroom door locked, and some sort of chirping coming from inside. Emily, he asked, and knocked on the door. Please come out. We need to talk this over, because I'm really confused. What is there to talk about? You've made your choice, came her obviously pained voice from inside. Billy Bob saw the human agent in the door and looked back at the locked bathroom door. Emily, don't do anything. I'll be right back. He quickly moved to the human woman. What the fuck did you do? I don't know. You're the one who's been living with her. Well, yeah, but I've never talked to her about whatever is going on. Why not? I don't know. I just assumed someone else would explain it to me when the time was right. He shrugged, obviously regretting his decision by now. Well, that was a stupid idea. Yes, thank you. I got that. He growled out with a frown. Hold on, the spy murmured and pulled a small earpiece from her ear, handing it to Billy Bob, who quickly set it into his own ear. This is Billy Bob. This is Billy. The fuck did you do to the Libertonian? I don't fucking know. Who is this? My name's Greg. I'm the senior agent. What's going on? She made some sort of mating display, and then you turned her down. I don't know what the fuck is going on. All right. Well, shit. Hold on, let me... Well, shit. Hold on, let me hold... Well, shit. Hold on, let me open up some files here. Okay. Libertonian mating rituals. Libertonian mating rituals are among some of the most complex and complicated in the known galaxy. That's fucking fantastic, Billy Bob muttered. Unlike most species, Libertonian form unions based around mutual benefit and enjoyment, rather than reproduction. This is likely a side effect of their homeworld and evolution, yada yada yada. Males and females are free to instigate with no cultural bias in gender and roles, blah blah blah. Are you a gender capable of breeding with her? I'm fucking human, and you know that. I don't think we can breed. Yeah, but you are male, so her brain might not be processing the fact that you're not one of her kind properly. Oh, Jesus. Billy Bob groaned out as he tried to think about what that meant. When a Libertonian female has chosen a significant other she wishes to mate with, or form a union with, her body will undergo certain changes which are only triggered at such a time. Many experience fluctuations of hormones unique to this experience as their body begins to form bonds with the scent, presence, and taste of their chosen significant other. Well, she can smell me, and I know she's tasted my blood, and not to mention, she rubs against me more now. During this time, there is a chance for the first-time mates to experience a decrease in self-awareness and logic, as their mental desire for acceptance becomes even directly related to certain pleasure senses. I guess it's a bit like dopamine. Once she's decided that she's likes you. Dopamine? Dopamine? Once she's decided that she likes you, her body started to change. And because you two have been fighting crabs and nearly dying at all. Fighting crabs and nearly dying and all that, it's likely she's been confusing. Fighting crabs and nearly dying and all that. She's likely she's been confused. And because and because you two have been fighting crabs and nearly dying and all that, it's likely she's been confusing sensations. So she's like riding a high when she's been around me lately and didn't realize she started to change because she's associated with the rush of fighting for her life. Yeah, I guess so. But that's if she's never done it before. Christ, Billy Bob muttered and rubbed his face with his hand. So basically all the hormones started turning her into a teenage girl, and it all sort of cascaded until she couldn't take it straight anymore. So when she saw your spy in a bright dress, it triggered some sort of mating ritual response, yes, sir. She's likely didn't notice your lack of response because her body was filling it for you. Filling it in for you. Just being around you made her think that you were fully accepting of what was going on. Or maybe she just misread it. I don't know. I'm not a xenobiologist. Billy Bob, Good morning, Phoenix. Hope you're doing well. Billy Bob let this all sort of wash through his mind as he tried to figure out what to do. All right. I'll talk to you later, he said, waving the spy out of the room before closing the door. Got any advice for me? I just hear her chirping in there. That's likely a secret of an ancient Libetonian language that's used only in the company of significant others. No information has been provided for translation implants due to the intimate nature of the language and general isolation of Libetonians for the last few hundred years. Good morning, Coyote. Hope you're doing well. Billy Bob thought it over and walked to one supply crate he brought up from the ship. He opened it up and took out one of the steaks they still had, plus a bottle of gin he'd wanted to save until he could find tonic and limes. He walked back to the bathroom door and knocked. Emily? He heard chirping as question marks scrolled along the bottom of his vision, as the translator implant couldn't process it. I don't know what you're saying. I'm not Libetonian, remember, but I brought you meat and alcohol. There was a pause, and then he heard a few more chirps. I still don't know what you're saying, but I have to say, you had better coloring than anyone I've ever seen. It was vibrant and intense and so amazing it confused me. He stood on the other side of the door and heard it unlock before she opened it up. He could see the streaks of tears down her cheeks, through the downy feathers. He held up the steak and the gin for her to see. I'm human, so you have to talk in your normal language for me. She blinked for a moment and then hastily... My pleasure, Coyote, my pleasure. She blinked for a moment and then hesitantly spoke up. You're providing for me? Yes. He nodded and He nodded and she reached out to take them, the claws in her hands sinking into the steak through the packaging as the others scratched the glass bottle as he shuddered scratched the glass bottle as he shuddered from the sound. I think we need to sit down and talk. He saw tears well up in her eyes. You're going to choose someone else? No, he quickly said, then stepped back, hands spread. But we do need to talk. He motioned towards the seats in the room, and she nodded slowly, moving out of the bathroom and sitting down, holding the steak and bottle in her lap. Billy Bob took a seat next to her. Am I your first mate? What does that have to... She stopped, and then her eyes went wide as she realized why he'd asked that. Oh, shit, she muttered. Yes, and all these emotions lately, and feelings, and... Oh, my intelligence god. I've been such an idiot, she exclaimed. Hey, I'm the idiot here. No, I totally forgot. With all the training I had about communication and diplomacy and all that, it was from the basis that everyone in the galaxy hated us. I never thought I'd develop feelings for a Xeno. So when I started to get all sensitive, I forgot you had no idea why. And I nearly killed you, so I was so focused on holding back so I didn't harm you with any other normal displays of affection. She clutched her head with her two free hands. Oh, I've been such an... I've been... I've been such an idiot. Hey, don't you take the blame here. I could tell you liked me, but I just figured we'd give it time, because, well, I was terrified after the first time that you'd just kill me. That you just... I just figured... But I just figured we'd give it time, because, well, I was terrified after the first time that you'd just... Well, I was terrified after that first time that you... Well, I was terrified after the first time that you'd just kill me if we did anything. And I didn't look into your species at all. I totally should have been more careful about that. And, it was something from when I was a kid that sort of, spoiled me on xeno relations. She looked confused at her and he sighed out. They showed us these pictures of humans who had been infected with xeno STDs, and it was awful and disgusting and disgusting and scared the crap out of me. But there aren't any known STDs that jump species. And wasn't your species just getting to know the local galaxy when you were young? Yeah. When you're a teenager, you don't think about stuff like that. Not when you've got Mrs. Munchausen for a teacher. Well, I really do like you, Billy Bob. I really do like you, Billy Bob. I really like you, Billy Bob, and I nearly killed you when I first tried to show it. And then you almost died at the museum. And then we spent all this time together. My brain just got all fuzzy, and I thought you just needed more of a clear indication that I wanted you as a mate, which is why you'd been so reluctant. Well, why did you just ask me that? Why did you talk to me about it? 'Cause, I generally bullshit my way through life, and I thought that I could do the same here. He shrugged at that. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. No. I should have seen the signs. I was going to talk to you about it back when we first tried to show you. When I first tried to show you, but, you nearly died, so that's all I was focused on, and when I'm around you, I feel so good and happy. When that human woman showed up and looked all colorful, I've been acting like a child, but you can fight and dance and cook, and you like amazing music, and I've never found a more perfect mate. Emily, I'm a human. I highly doubt that we can reproduce. So? He looked confused. Well, Libertonians' unions are about mutual enjoyment of one another's company. Why is reproduction important? Well, for human males, there's a certain, drive. He paused and looked up at her. So you're saying because I'm not human? He knew he had to take the plunge here. He'd never thought about it before meeting Emily, but he liked her. She could shotgun a beer like a champ. She was tall and graceful. Hell, she had to be a way better hunter than he'd ever be, and she totally kicked ass in that power suit. Plus, he just liked her. He was all hung up about her being a xeno, but that was selfish. He liked who she was, feck, what she looked like. No, Emily, now that I understand what's going on, I'd like to be your mate. I just didn't know it until I fought. No, Emily. Now that I understand what's going on, I'd like to be your mate. I just didn't know it until you fought that skank in the slutty dress away. She smiled at him, and he smiled back. Then he stood up, opening his arms, as she quickly jumped. Then he stood up, opening his arms, as she quickly jumped up and hugged him back. But her gloves were where she'd left him on the floor. So as she hugged him, her talons sank deep into the flesh on his back, and he gasped out in pain. She heard the noise and stepped back, the talons running along the shoulders as his eyes were wide in agony. When she pulled her hands away and saw the blood, a realization hit her. Oh, no. He slowly dropped to the ground and cried in pain, several strips of flesh missing from his back, his shirt and jacket torn easily. Oh, shit! Oh, merciful God! I'm sorry again! Don't move! I'll be back! She turned, running out the door as the human spy had to jump back. Don't let him die! I'm going to get biogel! The agent quickly rushed forwards and saw Billy Bob on the ground, groaning. Oh, why does she have to have such sharp claws? He gasped out. His life wasn't in danger, but he was in intense pain. Well, you know what they say, the spy said, unable to hold back a smirk. Love hurts. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob's Space Trucker. Oh, that's the button I was going for. That's the button. Shh. 2 chapters, 1 day. Oh my god, we're on such a roll. All right. And we got some T-Fosses coming up. Awesome, awesome, awesome. that too, Anthony. All right, I'm going to step away shortly. I'm going to leave you with music and chair. No, I haven't. But I can. Billy Bob was a bit of an experiment to see if 3 T-Foss on a series would work. Especially a very much HFY science fiction series. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Unfold. Right. Cool. So that's all the series stuff done today. Now we're going to do some T-Foss. T-Foss. Okay. All right. On to the first T-Foss. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of T-Foss, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Momentous, written by Matthew 41. On screens across the country, a woman politely but firmly elbowed a willowy man, dabbing an applicator at her face back behind a stage curtain, and took her place behind the podium. Endearingly plump, she would be naturally dark of complexion if she got more light from anywhere but a screen, and still pushing fingers through hair speckled with silver. She carefully adjusted a microphone before bothering with the blazer that she had hastily tossed on. The shirt beneath was still rumpled. Good evening. I'm the most... Good evening. I'm sure most of you already know me. I'm Georgia Wayland, head of the North American office of the Joint Space Exploration Project. The microphone amplified her notes tapping beneath the microphone amplified her notes tapping before she finally looked up, blinking bloodshot eyes. The makeup technician hadn't managed to hide the bags under them. You'll have to excuse the lack of preparation. We couldn't let this wait. Dave, come here. Dave, come here. Ahmed, I don't need to see every Nebula HR would... I don't... No, you don't. I don't need to see every Nebula HR would have words about. No, in the background radiation. Come listen. David sighed, but wheeled his chair over, plucked the earphones from Ahmed's hand, and settled them in place. Milder than normal. Wider cloud. Listen. Ahmed lifted his hand to glance between the cheap digital watch and Dave's face. When Dave cocked his head and squinted, Ahmed let a grin spread across his face. It's repeating. Perfectly. 23.7 seconds. Clockwork. Send this over. We'll analyze it. Georgia glanced over to the left, out of frame, when one of several people behind a laptop shook his head and mouthed a word, then nudged one next to him. That one nodded and grabbed a wireless mouse. Georgia didn't pretend to know the multimedia tech's job. They just did good work making the project, and her, as its spokesperson, look good. 23 years ago, we began to work on new scanners and propulsion. 18 years ago, we launched the Hermes to test the more advanced drives, take the most advanced readings yet of several of Jupiter and Saturn's moons. She had to stop under the applause from the front row. I can't take credit for that. It was under the leadership of James Mason before we lost him to retirement. Thanks, Mr. Mason. She lifted a black hand. She lifted a black and green can from the podium and tossed towards the cameras as the screen behind her played footage of the purpose-designed vessel. Somehow, sleek and bulky at once, punching its way through and punching its way through and out of the atmosphere on a pillar of flame. The techs knew their craft. They dropped the landing craft on Angelia and... yeah? It dropped the landing craft on Angelia 1 on Lepidus, and then Angelia 2 on Titan, then used Saturn and the Neptune's gravity to slingshot itself out for its mission to take readings through the Oort cloud and accelerate, taking its new drives from theoretical to proven. Behind her, now familiar, played the telescope-aided footage of Hermes shedding the shell of its carriage pod, and, with a flicker, boost atop a violet-white bloom. A dozen people had gathered behind several of the low cubicles, aside from the ones working at the computers. Some were spending their break there, some were working on tablets or scribbling in notebooks. One or two were simply staring. I've never seen this. Nothing like this. I know. Send it through. Send it through everything. See what we can pull out of it. Audio, visual, radio, gamma, every spectrum. I mean, there's a pattern. There are multiple patterns, like a little bit of everything, and that repeat. The closest I've ever seen picked up was in a system, like a satellite runoff, and this bit right here. David's mug paused at his lips, then slammed down onto the desk at the same time he stood quickly enough to knock the air. Then slammed down on the desk at the same time as he stood quickly enough to knock his chair over. Save this, now! Where to? The computer, my computer, the server cloud, your email. Send it to your goddamn phone, now! 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 He spun and grabbed Ahmed by the collar, bending him across his desk almost by main force and pointing at the monitor. Those bands there, isolate those. Start rendering them any way you can. Go, go, go! He yelled across the office. Parker, get Georgia on the phone, now! Hermes has been more stable than any of us expected, and it kept sending back readings. A lot of little minutiae that, honestly, only scientific journals are really interested in. Let's face it, that stuff's nerd shit. Quiet laughter from the journalists, aside from the mostly good-natured scoffs from the academic reporters. And the drives have been functioning admirably, faster than anything man-made has propelled itself to date. The screen switched to the view of the Hermes camera. The screen switched to the view from Hermes's camera, drifting past distant objects through a dust cloud. The scales of space are always humbling and apparently sluggish, particularly compared to the numbers now overlaid at the bottom of the screen. Miles and kilometers per hour, switching to seconds, and besides them a small but slowly climbing percentage of light speed. And then it broke out of the old cloud and went quiet. We'd expected that. It's space. It's kind of empty out there. She waved down another polite laugh from the front rows. Until, well, Ahmed shook his head. Dave, again, I can't print these. They're not just readings, not static, animated. Not the cameras. This, he gestured at the screen and the bright spots across it. A haze represented the Oort cloud surrounded by a bright dot, obviously intended to mock the sun and others further out. Don't mean the cameras. Here, Ahmed smacked the keyboard. The view expanded, and more blurs and dots appeared inward from the edges of the screen, and then sparkled into color. The solar system turned green. One star further along Hermes' path turned yellow, the other direction. Then a second, a third. Flickered a red and screen didn't quite have the color for. The speakers crackled, playing sounds from some analysis. Playing sounds some of the analysts might recognize as the signature of a particular stars as they lit up. Numbers began making. And numbers began marking them. And suddenly, the speakers were the only sound. Dave's mug fell from his hand. Georgia had to raise her voice above the press rabble. She couldn't help herself facing the camera for long, joining the reporters in staring at the screen behind her. She clutched her can like a lifeline at this point, aching eyes forgotten as stars lit up. Sol, green, now with subscript 3. A yellow star, 2. Red, 1, 4, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, I just don't have a word for what history will record today. She had to make another drink. She had to take another drink. Her mouth had gone dry, and her grin was almost manic, as one star, another, a half-dozen distant suns twinkled on the screen, green rings flaring to life and pulsing around them. But someone does. The speakers that had been amplifying her microphone delivered the same single word in a dozen languages, oddly accented, delivered by an orator and tongued unaccustomed to any of them. Welcome. End of story. A little short one. We actually got 3 short ones in a row here. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read T-Plus, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called You Attacked Earth, written by Saiga123. Standing before the gathered representatives of every major power in the galaxy, the ambassador of Earth stoically stared at them, his face not betraying the slightest hint of emotion as the alien sat nervously before him, some not able to meet his gaze for more than a few seconds, while others glared with open hostility. Clearing his throat, the alien, which sat at the center of the long table, stood and said, "Greetings, Ambassador. We are here honored." Greetings, Ambassador. We are honored to have you here with us on this momentous day when the Terran Empire joins our union of civilization. Getting no response from the man, the chairman of the union shifted uncomfortably under the human's gaze before holding up a document. "Now that we have finished negotiating the terms of the treaty, all that's left to do is to be ratified by each member of the union, and it would be my honor to be the first to welcome your mighty empire on behalf of the Raxium Dominion," he said as he made his mark, followed by the official sigil of the empire he represented. Passing the document down the table, the other ambassadors followed suit, some making brief, half-hearted remarks as they signed, while others simply begrudgingly scrawled their assent before shoving the documents away in distaste, until it ended in front of a reptilian alien, who let out a snarl and threw the document away from him onto the floor. "How can he even think of allowing these barbarians to stand amongst us as equals?" "Peace, my friend. Peace." "Peace, my friend," the chairman said placatingly. "We have already agreed." "You agreed," he said as he cast an accusing gaze over the other diplomat. "Then none of you suffered at the hands of these savages as we have. 24 nursery planets gone, reduced to ash and cinders, rendered uninhabitable by their war machines. You attacked Earth," the human ambassador replied simply. "A few 100,000 humans there most," the lizard man sneered. "You wiped out entire generations of my kind. Entire broods culled before they even hatched. Never have such acts of barbarism ever been committed before. You left that tiny rock you call home," he said, as he pointed a clawed finger at him. "You up-jumped apes commit atrocities and expect us to welcome you with open arms. Demand that we follow these rules of war that you are so proud of, but cast off the moment they become inconvenient for you to follow. Under your own laws, you'd be considered war criminals for what you did. You attacked Earth," the human ambassador repeated, his voice carrying a harsh edge which silenced the irate alien. Stepping towards him in a slow and deliberate pace, the human ambassador stood in front of him and stared into his reptilian eyes. "We've only been a spacefaring race for barely 3 centuries, our colonies extending only to a small corner of this galaxy, and we first met you. And when we first met you, we extended a hand of peace, and you spat in our face. You attacked Earth," he said as he leaned forward with his knuckles pressed against the table, forcing the alien to take a step back, and stumbled against his chair. "Before we encountered you, we were still divided. Countries and companies warring over who got the rights to any and every exploitable planet, and then you attacked. All of a sudden, we had a common enemy, and all of our tribalism became pointless. We no longer fought amongst ourselves, not when we had you to fight against." Bending down to pick up the treaty, the ambassador slammed it back down on the table, making all the delegates flinch and recoil. Do you even know why we have these rules of war? Our species is built on a history of bloodshed. Every single one of these rules is in place to stop us repeating that history. We have committed genocide against our own kind, enslaved each other, warred with each other, slaughtered each other, tortured, maimed, and killed each other. We have these rules because without them, we would have annihilated ourselves before we even left Earth. But these rules are there to protect us from ourselves. There were never any provisions about how we can act to a hostile alien force which attacked our homeworld, he said, his voice seething with barely contained anger, making the lizardman's blood run cold. Standing up straight, he continued, So now you have the entire unified human race outraged at this unprovoked attack against our home, directing all their anger at your union of civilizations with absolutely no rules holding us back. Except for this, he said as he pushed the treaty towards the trembling. This treaty binds us all to the same restraints that us humans have self-imposed on ourselves. So, I suggest that you sign the damned treaty. Otherwise, you'll find out just why we humans need so many rules. Unable to bear the heavy gaze, the lizardman turned away and meekly signed the document. Good, the human ambassador said as he took a treaty and tucked it under his arm. It seems like my business here is done. It seems like my business here has concluded. Good day to you, gentlemen, he said before promptly leaving. As soon as the door closed behind him, the remaining diplomats let out a breath they had all been holding. What a ghastly species, one commented. We should never have agreed to letting them join us. The combined might of our union would undoubtedly crush the Terran Empire, yes, the chairman agreed before continuing, but at an unpalatable cost. They burned scores of planets in retribution for not even 1/10 dead humans. Imagine what they would do if pushed into a corner. No, it is safer to bind these savages to us. Try and civilize them, if not outright tame them. They are rabid beasts, the lizardman spat out. There is no taming them. Mark my words, these humans will spread like a pestilence through the galaxy until they are too strong to put us... Until they are too strong for us to put down. We should act now before they turn on us. Glaring angrily at the lizardman, the chairman said, Then why did you sign the treaty if you're so against them joining us? Giving him a sullen look, the lizardman said, It'll take decades, if not centuries, to recover from the loss of our nursery planets. We are not in a position to fight against such a savage species. And neither are any of us, the chairman huffed, fighting with these... And neither are any of us, the chairman huffed. Fighting with these humans, fighting with these humans will be irrevocable. Fighting with these humans will irrevocably weaken the Union. So I suggest you all get used to Terran Empire. I doubt they shall be keeping to themselves. End of story. I even cracked out the old Jonathan Hurt voice. Yeah. I don't really crack that voice out too often. It's a bit hard on the old vocal cords. Good day, friend. Hope you're doing well. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Free T-Boss, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called The Cost of Staying Behind, written by Angry Viola. To my dearest daughter, I am writing this letter for two reasons. First, I must tell you that this is mine. I will be staying with the Terran forces, and will not be evacuated with you. I spent a long time thinking this. I am old, and my feathers have faded, but my mind is still sharp. We both know that I am coming to an end of my life, and I would rather meet my end here than anywhere else. Second, I want you to understand why I'm doing this. I will not ask you to agree with my decision, or forgive me for making it. But the circumstances of my life are reaching a climax, and I find myself with no other choice. I will not berate you with excuses, but at least I owe you is an explanation. I was born on Setection in a small village outside the kingdom. I never knew my mother. She died just after I was born. But my father was a well-respected. I never knew. She died just after I was born. But my father was well respected in our village, and we lived comfortably. I remember when the first Terrans settled at the edge of our village. They were not treated well back, especially in the early period of Terran Galactic Union. That was before the war, when we could afford the luxury of looking down on others. As the cycles passed, we got used to seeing them every now and then around town. They were good for fixing machines, for fending off things that crawled out of the forests, and for various other tasks my people looked down on. That is to say, things that they were not. Things they could not or were too scared to do. In the few cycles that they lived alongside us, they asserted themselves as caring, strong, and my people begrudgingly respected them. My father, while not the most powerful admin in the village, worked closely with the Terrans and advocated for them in petty village disputes and other unjustified means of discriminating against them. One of my fondest memories from this time was dining with a family of Terrans that my father had worked with. They insisted that we be served by them, like we were nobles from the capital. They completely lacked feathers and talons, and didn't have any sort of beak or bill. It's almost funny how strange they seemed to me. How young. And at one point in the evening, the Terrans expressed concern over how the Zertian Empire became increasingly more and more hostile towards neighboring states. My father eased their concerns, insisting that even if the Zers declared war, we were a part of the Great Confederacy. The Confederacy would protect. Why would we even be a target? We were just a small village on a small planet. There was no reason for us to worry. How cruel the irony of the universe. We were completely blindsided by the Zertian War of Extermination, and the Great Confederacy that my father had praised fell apart almost immediately. Havens are considered predators only on paper. We couldn't match the sheer force of the extremely predatory and militaristic race like the Zers. During the evacuation, my father and I stumbled through the smoke towards the Terran part of the village. He grew worried when none of them reached the evac point, and, not wanting to leave me on my own since I was still a fledgling, took me with him to the Terran side of town. As we approached the group, my father called out to them, "The evacuation! The evacuation is already underway. If we hurry, we might be able to... If we hurry, we might be... If we hurry, we can take the... If we hurry, we can make the next onslaught of shuttles." He always spoke in a short, matter-of-fact way. But despite his call, only one of the Terrans moved forward to meet us. He was holding a revolver. Terrans were infamous for their kinetic weapons, and I had never seen one in person before. There were 20 or so of them gathered at the edge of the village. All of them were armed. Some had small firearms of some kind or another, but most held small daggers, blunt objects, and whatever else they could get their hands on. "Friend." Terrans lacked the ability to pronounce even names, and usually referred to Avi formally as Mr. or Miss. Friend was his title, exclusively held by my father. "We're going to hold off the Zertian forces for as long as we can. Take your son and get the hell out of here." This took my father back. He was known for never losing his composure. But when the Terran said this, his feathers visibly ruffled, and he practically screeched his next words, "You will die! Please, come with us! Evacuate!" The Terran placed his hand on my father's shoulder. "Everyone here knows the cost of staying behind, but the Zertian forces will be here any minute now. If we don't do this, no one will make it off this goddamn rock." My father looked into the Terran's eyes, and they said nothing for a long time. Without looking down at me, he spoke. "Son, run to the evac point. Do not stop and do not look back. I will meet you there." "Dad, now!" His shout stopped me, and I ran. I ran like a coward. The smoke stung my eyes and burned my lungs. I reached the evac point with my talons raw and my feathers caked with soot. And even when I escaped the planet, I didn't stop running. I spent the next many cycles of my life always just ahead of the Zers. I never saw my father again. I didn't care. For so long, I felt as though he abandoned me with those damned... The planet fell within a month, and within a cycle, it was deemed uninhabitable. He died for nothing, and I hated it. During my travels, I spent time with nearly every major species in the galaxy, but it seemed no matter where I went, I always ended up on a Terran ship or with a Terran. I hated them at first, the species that convinced my father to die like an owie. But the more time I spent with them, the more I came to understand them. I eventually understood that my father didn't die. He died for me. I grieved my father long after he died, and when I did, I was comforted by Terran. After many cycles of traveling and living with Terrans, I became a Terran outreach ambassador. Most species were more trusting of an Avi than a Terran, and I laid the groundwork for many alliances needed to face the oncoming Xertian threat. I was stationed on a Terran colony, used as a resupply station for the war. There, despite the universe seemingly coming to an end around me, I fell in love with your mother. She was an extremely traditionalist Avi. She was an extremely traditionalist Avi, and by then I acted more Terran than Avi. As the Terrans say, opposites attract. Within the next couple of cycles, we had you, and another couple cycles later. And another couple cycles later, your mother passed away. When your mother passed, I thought I was going to die as well. The only way I could function was to pour myself into my work, and in doing so, I unknowingly neglected you. I won't insult you by describing my shortcomings as a father, but all I want to give you are my deepest and most sincere. Now, while I try hold onto the ghost of your mother and the shattered remnants of our relationship, the Xertians have come to finish what they started all those cycles. I know you'll expect me to go with you, but I cannot bring myself to run anymore. You are not a fledgling. You are beautiful and brilliant young. You will go far. I'm out of time. I hope you understand why I'm doing this, and that I love you. Love from this life and the next. Pew, pew. Bit of a tearjerker in the last one. Mm, 2767. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Where I take old stories I've narrated. No, don't take old stories. Where I take stories from. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. There's two more stories. Shisha. Should be a 12-minute story and a 10 minutes. So we're on time to finish in about 45 minutes. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Not a problem, not a problem. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Medical Emergency, or Why You Should Always Read the Manual, written by 97C Webb. Pass me the green Robbie. Pass me the green Robbie, Arthur tells his assistant Ash. Here, replies the most recent recruit to the starship Borderland. That should do it, Arthur states, as he lowers the access patch back into... That should do it, Arthur states, as he lowers the access hatch back into the place for the ship's tertiary cabin air distributor, and hands the screwdriver back to the young Bordos. Ash, being impressed by his ability to perform two tasks at the same time, fails to notice the screwdriver being held directly in front of him for a few seconds, and then suddenly jumps, realizing the dark green instrument is less than a foot away. He quickly takes it and starts walking to the chest where the tools for this area are stowed. He quickly takes it and starts walking to the chest where the tools for this area are stored. Switching over to automatic walking, he finally takes the odd sensation that something is not quite right with the screwdriver. Looking down, he notices that the screwdriver has some bright red spots mottling its normally dull surface. Turning back to Arthur, Ash asks, Arthur, while returning this implement for driving screws, I noticed, suddenly cutting off his sentence as his mind narrows in on Arthur's face and more specifically, the smeared material right above his mouth. Finally remembering that people excrete blood red material. Finally remembering that people excrete bright red material when in distress, as it means their insides are now partially outside. He panics and freezes, with his mouth still partly open. He panics and freezes, with his mouth still partly around the words he was just saying. What's wrong? What is wrong? Asks Arthur, slightly puzzled by the sudden lockup in his latest recruit. Feeling a little weirded out by the assistant staring, Arthur eventually waves his arm in front of Hash's face. At this moment, he feels a drop of fluid slide from the right lip. hit the corner of his mouth and fall. At this motion, Ash finally unlocks, seeing that the level of red excretion hitting the critical point where the ship's artificial gravity takes effect and pulls it down into the deck. His mind finally goes into full overdrive mode. He suddenly drives off. He suddenly dives at Arthur to try and tackle him to the ground. Arthur, being slightly confused by the reaction he just saw, fails to dodge Hash's tackle and is knocked backwards into the wall and onto the ground. What was that for? Ash, slightly stunned by the impact of the human, then bolts for the next medical alert panel. At this point, Arthur finally tastes the all-too-familiar rusty penny flavor that every person knows. Oh, great, he states, as he finally senses what has occurred, finally realizing that Hash is running a full sprint to the medical panel. Arthur gets up and runs towards him, quickly catching up. Hash, still focusing on the single task at hand, finally picks up movement and decides to dive into the medical alert panel, just as Arthur tries to grasp his back. Both Arthur and Hash careen into the wall at high speed, causing both of each to collide, caused by each other colliding. Let go, Hash exclaims. Don't push the button, Arthur yells back, while still being squished by the 2.5-meter tall tank. I have to. You are hurt. I am not. Yes, you are. I am not. I am not. I am not. Ash, with every muscle in his body, springs up and presses the large red button at the wall, immediately setting off a high-pitched shriek throughout the entire ship. Arthur continues to try and get Hash off of him, as Hash continues to try and pin him down so the emergency medical team can arrive. Seconds later, a siren and heavy, quick footsteps are heard rapidly approaching Hash's position. Over here! I can't hold him down for much longer, Hash exclaims. Suddenly, 2 more Bordos, dressed in dark blue, arrive, pushing a large bed with 10 computers connected to it. 3 Bordos together restrain and place Arthur onto the bed and immediately start opening the emergency cauterizer. And immediately start opening the emergency cauterizer. I'm not hurt, it's just exclaims Arthur as he is hurtled through the halls of the ship and being stabbed with a bunch of needles rising from the surface of the bed. Arriving at a very small medbay, Hash is escorted to the very dim, sterile waiting area, which is currently empty. As Hash sits, he sees another 2 doctors, also dressed in dark blue, rush past, followed quickly by another Bordos dressed in somber black, and hair looking like just come from a cleaning pods. And hair looking like they just came from a cleaning pod. The doctors surround Arthur, who is in the bed, putting himself into a sitting position. At this moment he coughs, bringing up the blob of blood that acclimated in his throat as he was lying down on the bed. Seeing 4 doctors, and then Bordos dressed in black, he realizes that they think that he is in grave danger. I'm not hurt. Just look up section 523-6. I'm not hurt. Just look up section 523-7. I'm not hurt. Just look up section 523-763 of care humans labeled non-threatening. It's just there, right there under... No time, rumbles the black one of the doctors. Lie down so that we can heal you. Chaplain Hurst is here in case we cannot treat you. She will read up on your rituals to ensure that you are buried with dignity of your culture. I'm not dying! He's already gone into delusion. He won't be long, replies the 3rd doctor, with all of the bedside manners of the 3rd cycle medical students. I'm all right, just let me be for a few minutes, responds Arthur forcefully. Preparing sedative. You'll be okay, Arthur, Dr. Force states, while grabbing a needle and a small dusty vial off the shelf. Dr. 1, finally getting the emergency cauterizer activated, lunges for Arthur's head and pins him down to the bed. There is no way to heal you if you won't let us treat you, she exclaims. You don't need to stick the glowing piece of metal in my... Immobilization strips, please, Dr. 1 states, while locking Doctor's head. while locking Arthur's head down to the table. After a few more seconds, the doctors finally get the strips down, preventing Arthur from moving, including his head immobilizer. Arthur's sigh settles up for a second. Arthur's sighs settles for a second, and in a moment, a large yellow glowing rod touches his upper lip. Ow! Jumping from the pain of the cauterizer, Arthur tears all the straps off the bed and jumps on his feet. The doctors, with the cauterizer in hand, looks down and sees the large dark red blob now clinging to the end of it. Panicking, all of the doctors and the chaplain freeze stiff again, allowing Arthur to run out of the medical room and past the frozen hash as well. At this point, the medical team unfreezes and initiates lost patient protocol. The entire ship suddenly erupts in a mass panicking as they turn the ship upside down, trying to find Arthur before it's too late. With Arthur being the first human on the board or ship, they do not want to return with a dead one. Scouring the ship for over an hour, they finally remember the humans are semi-territorial and prefer to be in familiar space when death is upon them. Or something along those lines. Or something along the lines of that. With this information, the medical team goes to his room, only to find the no entry sign enabled on the door. Must be part of their death rituals, Dr. 2 states to the others. Captain Hurst, start researching the way that humans deliver the dead back to their world. We'll come back tomorrow to collect the body. I'll go inform the captain that Arthur's behavior along with his death. Our customary memorial service will be held early tomorrow. In the morning, a message is relayed over the intercom for all on board to meet at GP-1. All attend, wondering what this meeting is supposed to be once they get there. The room is dimly lit, with the glass protectors fully open, but the ship rolled to have it on its dark side. Finally, they see the standard affair of death ritual before them. The entire mood changes within the crowd, and murmurs of sadness, despair, and mourning are spread. Some even start to sing the song of death. A few minutes later, Hash arrives, dressed in full black, and with a quick flourish with his arm, gets the entire crowd to become quiet. The captain of the ship then entered and stood behind Hash, with a somber look in their eyes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hash. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hash, the assistant engineer who worked with Arthur. As you can tell by the atmosphere around us, this is supposed to be the memorial service of Arthur today, but we cannot find his body. A silent murmur tore through the crowd at that moment, as they all started discussing the rarity of it and trying to remember who saw Arthur last. The captain then stepped forth, saying, Due to the circumstances, I ask all of you to help search for Arthur's body, so that we can continue with our ceremony. The entire crowd murmured in agreement, and quickly divided themselves into looking throughout the ship. Many checked individual quarters, the reactor room, even the panels he was seen working on over the past. Ash, lost and without hope, stumbled into the canteen and sat down in his normal spot with a glass of flavored drink to help dull the pain. Lost in thought about his missing friend and where he would have gone, he does not notice the other Bordos pacing through the canteen to check other areas of the ship. Still lost in thought, he thinks about the number of times he had heard Arthur sit down and wish he had coffee. Where did everyone find coffee today? I have not seen this much activity on the ship ever. Ash jumped off his seat and nearly hit the ceiling after hearing the all-too-familiar voice. Whoa, calm down. What's going on today? Is it a maniac cleaning ceremony? Is it a manic cleaning ceremony? Ash, now recovered from his quick trip to the metal roof, stood frozen at the sight of his friend Arthur, now standing before him. Arthur, seeing him frozen again, goes to wave his arm in front of him. Goes to wave his arm in front of Hash's face, but then touches his upper lip and checks it again. Nope, no blood this time. Come on, snap out of it. Hash defrosts and then tears down the nearest hallway, running over the more Boros on the way. Hash defrosts and then tears down the nearest hallway, running over more Borodos on the way. Arthur, remembering what happened last time, chases him down and grapples him, causing both to come crashing down, this time with Arthur in control. Slow down there. There is no race unless there is. You don't need to press the medical alert button again. I'm not hurt. At this point, several more Bordos circled around them, and upon seeing Arthur, freed off. Within a minute, about 40 others are around them, and all are still as statues. Arthur, slowing his movements for a moment, hoping that he won't get dogpiled by all of them, loses his grip on Hash, who immediately hits the medical button. As more alarms sound, the doctors arrive, all freeze. Eventually, the captain, who knows the doctors silence the alarms once they get into the med bay, comes down as they know the ship is not large enough. The alarm needs to play for 10 minutes. The captain bellows, "What is the central issue to cause such commotion at this hour?" As he comes around the corner of the hallway towards Hash, the captain too immediately freezes as soon as he sees Arthur, surrounded by 3/4 of the crew, along with all the doctors and engineering staff. "I'm not hurt," Arthur states, in a quick, muffled voice, and at that time, all of the Bordos defrost and tackle him, catching him off the GP1. Carting him off to GP1, at which point the captain and medical team start to ask some questions about human reanimation. "I'm not dead. I'm still alive. I just had a nosebleed." End of story. Ooh-wee. Yes, I don't like them either. All right, on to the next one. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Humans Are Space Cat, written by Mono KS. The news of extraterrestrial contact was huge back on Earth. Waves of excitement, anxiety, and curiosity all delved into mind bickering. All delved into mild bickering as the United Nations continued to study and monitor these new alien life forms. After their discovery of faster-than-light travel, humanity then finally was found by the Galactic Union, a far-stretching organization that functioned much like the United Nations. Wanting to make a good impression, the UN then hereby passed legislation that designated all of Earth as one country on paper. Of course, things continued to function as is. But the next question after the invention was who was to represent them. After some discussion and voting, Secretary of State for Defense Joshua Higgins was hereby voted to be Earth's first ambassador. Hailing from the United Kingdom, his scars and tough demeanor from the 7th Afghan War were evident. Humanity wanted to make a strong yet peaceful impression, and what better way than a man from a military background who was evidently anti-war. Higgins observed himself in the mirror of his HMS Elizabeth II as it traveled through the cosmos. The ambassador took a deep breath. He sported a graying beard, a neat brushed haircut, and a professional suit with little secret flasks settled in his pocket. The flag pin of the United Nations glimmered in the light as he held an alien-looking tablet. Provided to humanity was a sort of learning book for all new species they were to encounter. The Glabians, the Zolthars, the Harlaks, each new species different yet equally intelligent. And while he was equipped with his auto-translator, Higgins wanted to make a good first impression to the Galactic Union. Finally, the spaceship stopped in its designated docking yard as air pressure returned to accommodate the newcomer. Higgins finally stepped off the ship. It wasn't so much a welcome delegation, but his tablet showed coordination. But his tablet showed coordinates to the main Galactic Union chambers. It seems that they were waiting for him. With a huff, Higgins walked off, but as he did, he couldn't help but spot two aliens acting giddy as he passed. Higgins took a deep breath. He kept himself composed despite the first time he finally saw an alien life form. As he continued into the halls of the large complex, Higgins was guided onto a platform by the computer, and soon it started to raise. Higgins stood stern and still as the platform raised, and finally, as he reached the top, Higgins was met with aliens of all sorts, each sitting in their seats while they stood behind what seemed to be a podium. He took a deep breath as he stared back at the alien, and was met with waves of ahs. "Ah, look at it, it's so cute and small. It looks so fluffy." Higgins blinked, dumbfounded. Was his translator not working properly? He shook his head before he approached the podium. He tapped the mic. He tapped the mic-like device as it resonated. "Ah, he's playing. Go on, little guy." "Okay, maybe it is broken." Higgins pulled out his speech as he cleared his throat. "Dear delegates of the Galactic Union, I stand before you Aw, cute." Higgins cleared his throat. "I stand before you as a representative of my dear planet Earth, a small planet, a humble civilization. But we do not stand alone against each other, for humanity in its darkest era stood together against a common threat." Suddenly, the man shuddered and squirmed as he felt some sort of wet tentacle start to pet the top of his head. He looked to the side to see some sort of octopus-like alien reaching the long tentacle to caress his hair. Higgins simply stepped aside a bit. Together against a common threat, I introduced myself as Joshua Higgins of the United Nations of Earth. And much like our people, we desire to—" Again, the alien was petting him, so he tried to step aside. "We desire to work harmoniously with each... harmoniously, with equal respect as we intended. With that, the United Nations of Earth extends our first heartfelt greetings. Hey, quit it!" Higgins at this point smacked the hand against the tentacle as it quickly retracted. He went wide-eyed as he looked at the delegation. Oh God, he'd fecked up. "Yeah, look at the grumpy little boy. Joshua, what a strange but cute name. I want to pet it too." Ah. After that embarrassment of a speech, Higgins wanted nothing more than to hide away from the rest of the delegation. As everyone else was busy in the equivalent of a bar, Higgins decided he seriously needed a nap to get some energy again before he could meet the delegates after the debacle. But the aliens had other plans. Dr. Fleet, walking down the hallway with a container in his claws, with a snicker, he eyed the tablet. The human should be somewhere around here, and ho and behold, there the human was, resting in one of the empty lounges. Beside him was Dr. Zlothler, who spoke in a hushed whisper. "Ah, come on, Dr. Fleet. Let the poor human sleep. Oh, lighten up, Zlothler. This will be funny, I promise." Flit said with a toothy chap. What do you mean, What do you mean? What do you have in there? Slother asked. I have an earthling creature here called a fly. Humans seem to really like swatting and chasing after them. Admit it. That sounds cute, doesn't it? Flit said as he gazed towards the adorable human. We're doing this for research, Zlotha said, only to grip the doorway as she peeked over towards Higgins. So fluffy. I want to pet it. Shh, shh, Flit said, after he inputted a code. The container opened as the strange buzzing black creature flew out and erratically. The two doctors watched as the fly roamed around the room before it reached Higgins. As it landed on his humans. As it landed on the human's cheek, Higgins' face crunched up as he moved his head to get the tickling feeling off. And when it landed again, he grumbled as his hand tried to get the fly off. Flit snickered as he stared to record this with his tablet. Flit snickered as he started to record this with his tablet, and Slother tried to hold back her laughter. Finally, as the fly annoyed him enough, Higgins woke up with an angered voice as he quickly stood up. You bloody! Higgins grabbed the file that he brought as he rolled it up and started to chase after the fly. Get back here, you little bastard! Oh, look at him. Come on, little guy. You can get it. Flit cheered through the mental... Flit cheered through a mental signal to Zlotha as they kept quiet. You can get it. Flit cheered through the mental signal to Zlotha as they kept quiet, yet amused. Higgins's temper started to flare as he chased the fly around the room. If he wants something dead, he'll have to make it. Finally, with a hard smack against the window showing the view of the stars, Higgins managed to swat the fly. Finally, I got you, you little bastard. How did your fly get in here anyway? He said in an annoyance. And just as Higgins turned his head to the doorway, Flit and Zlotha quickly ran off in fits of clicks and giggles. Higgins expected belittlement, but not this way. Ever since he got to the Galactic Union's headquarters, he was being treated as some sort of amusement. Pets, baby talks, even being played with in his sleep. Higgins ignored the compliments and attempts to pet him as he reached the bar. And of course, the bartender approached him with the same attitude. Ah, hey there, little guy. What can I get to the little cutie? Ugh. Higgins scowled back in annoyance, which somehow only made the bartender get even more giddy with his apparent cuteness. Give me the toughest thing you've got. Sure thing, here. The bartender then grabbed a capsule of some sort of glowing blue liquid and handed it to Higgins. Safe for a little guy like you to enjoy. Drink up, cutie. Higgins sighed as he grabbed the capsule and opened it up. As he tasted it, it just tasted like juice, no hints of alcohol in it at all. Higgins drank it up, and yet he was feeling nothing at all. With a sigh, he reached into his coat and instead pulled out his flask as he started to quickly down his whiskey. Suddenly, alarms rang out through the bar. Panic seemed to spread through the delegates, and they were rapidly approaching Higgins. One delegate, a giant bug-like creature, quickly grabbed his flask. What the little human? This is ethanol. This is not for drinking. Spit it out. What on earth? Give it back, Higgins said. Us humans can drink this. Someone, we need to get him to a medic, stat, the bug said, ignoring Higgins's yelp an explanation as he carried the human in his 6 arms. Hurry! Put me down this instant! Higgins demanded as the bug was quickly accompanied by everyone else in the room, all to bring the human to the medic for drinking alcohol. Higgins has never been more glad to be back in London. After days of unsolicited petting, compliments, and baby talks, the United Nations was dumbfounded at his reports of what happened. Somehow, humanity was designated the cutest species in the galaxy, which felt insulting and somehow flattering. For Higgins, however, it was fully insulting, and as he entered the flat of as he entered his flat in Westminster, he sighed a deep breath of relief. He sighed a deep breath of relief as he wandered into his living room. Higgins immediately took a drink of his replacement flask, missing alcohol more than he realized as he stared at the mirror. I can't believe they saw this as adorable, the gruff man said, only to damp himself into an armchair. Higgins sighed deeply, only to hear a soft meow. A grey, male British Shorthair approached him as he gently blinked. With that, Higgins smiled. Hey there, Brutus. Miss me? Brutus meowed, only to walk off with his usual smug attitude. Higgins chuckled as he watched Brutus distract himself with his toy, and as he did, he choked on his whiskey as he reached. And as he did, he choked on his whiskey as he reached a realization. Humans are space cats. End of story. Oh. Cricket a crack. Yawn. Okay. That's going to be me for the day. Thank you kindly for spending your time with me. It's very much appreciated. I will be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. Yeah. I hope you all have a fantastic one, whatever that may be. Cheers.